to our Amplify virtual meeting, and today we are talking all about live music, live sound, and we have brilliant engineer, sound engineer, Amy Wright. Amy, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so let me just try and get the presentation working. And then, oh, let me see if it works now. There we go. Hopefully you should be able to see my screen now. There we go. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so first of all, thank you so much to Andrea for having me. It was a pleasure. So in this webinar, we're going to be talking about how you can maximize your live performance. And we're just going to have a little rundown of today's webinar. So we're going to do a little bit of an introduction, so you'll get to know a bit about me, and hopefully we'll get to know a little bit about you too. We're going to talk a bit about communications. Why is good communication so important when you are in a live atmosphere? Tech specs. What is a tech spec and how do I write one? Do I really need one? Sound checks. What makes a good sound check? And then at the bottom, I think I've covered by it, but there is a little Q&A as well, which we'll have at the end. So if you have any questions throughout the duration of this webinar, please just pop your questions in the comments and I will see them when I join back to the main presentation in a bit, but we'll start. So a little introduction. So a little bit about me. Hi, I'm Mimi. I am a live sound engineer, stage crew and stage management, and also load in and out crew for shows. I'm based in Brighton currently. So this summer I worked 5 festivals where I did live sound engineering, stage management, technical setups, and I also did a bit of production as well for festivals, including the Great Escape Festival, which is in Brighton, 2000 Trees Festival, which is in Cheltenham, Boomtown, which is in Winchester, Arctangent Festival in Bristol, and Victorious Festival in Portsmouth. And I am also currently a third-year student at BIM, University of Brighton, studying songwriting and music production. So quite early on into my career still, but I'm just having the most amazing time, and I've already had so much experience that I feel like it would be amazing for me to share with you guys. So just got a few little photos here from festivals. So in the top left corner, that was me on the sound desk at Arctangent. I wasn't supposed to be, but I ended up on the sound desk. And then the next one across is me at 2000 Trees on our stage, the Forest stage. So not only was I a monitor and front of house engineer for that festival, I also loaded in and out the main stage. So I worked with quite a few big bands there, loading Arctics. It was a lot of early and late nights, and then long days as well with sound engineering in the middle, but I absolutely loved it. Across there's a couple from Boomtown, Victorious, ATG obviously from Arctangent. You can see our little Forest stage with the red lights as well. But yeah, a lot of different setups, a lot of different styles and genres of music, which I was so thrilled to be working with. And then I found this little statistic online that made me quite shocked when I saw it, so I thought I would share it with everyone. It says women are chronically underrepresented in the sound and music technology fields. It's estimated that they make up just 5% of the music tech industry. So I am so lucky to be part of the 5% in the industry, but I am still shocked that statistic is so low. And I would love to advocate and change that as much as possible. So I think it's really important that organisations like Amplify Her are giving me the opportunity to do this presentation tonight, because I feel like by educating people, not only am I helping women in the industry, but I'm also potentially inspiring people of the next generation to come and do sound engineering and other technical roles in the industry. And without people in those technical roles, these live events wouldn't happen effectively. But yeah, it used to be 2% the statistic, so it is getting better, but there is definitely still a lot of work to be done to get that statistic to a higher percentage, as it's still a very male-dominated industry. So I've just rambled a little bit on about myself and what I've done a little bit briefly as well. So now it's your turn. So in the comments below, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and telling me a little bit about your goals within the industry, and just a little disclaimer, this is a safe space for everyone. So please be respectful and supportive, as this is all what Amplify Her is about. So yeah, if you can just pop in the comments, I'm gonna escape now and hopefully see if I can see some of your comments. I'll give you guys a second to type. But it'd just be nice to know when I'm presenting what everyone else's goals in the industry are, so I can sometimes tailor the presentation to your needs. So if you've got any guitarists, I know we've got a saxophonist in here, so maybe I can make that a little bit relevant. Cool. Sorry, I know I put everyone on the spot here. Piano and vocalist. Oh, perfect. Lovely. Hi, I'm Larissa. My stage name is. I'm a singer, songwriter, DJ, and performer. Wow. Okay, amazing. Goal to release an EP and start performing live more. Amazing. Sounds incredible. Carol, vocal coach, she's done a lot of gigs but never had to do a tech spec. Here to learn more about the tech side of gigging for myself and to educate my students. Perfect. Well, that's what today is all about. Singer and guitarist. I've played both solo and with a band. Hope to pick up singing, harmony, lead vocals. I love country music. Looking for tips of what to ask for so I know what I'm doing. Sing live, working my debut single. Congratulations. Daisy, also have keys and vocals. Work on my songwriting, learn from you all. New to playing in public. Congratulations. Done a sound course for beginners. And Beth, my goal is how to do a headline show soon and to figure out how to get the best sound acoustically. Amazing. Diana, Mexican artist, singer, songwriter, been work performance. Okay, perfect. So we have a broad mix here. Amazing. That's what I love to see. Perfect. Okay, so there's quite a wide range of everyone. So hopefully we can all learn something today. And I appreciate you all for joining me. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start a little bit with communication. So why is communication so important in the music industry? It's important for quite a few reasons. So technical aspect. Communication is important from a technical perspective to ensure the sound levels, lighting levels, stage setup, pardon me, enhance your performance and that both parties are happy. So I think that is one of the key things. If you're not communicating and you envision for a song that you wanted this color lighting and the engineer's done this, you think, actually, I don't quite like it. It's important that you communicate that, or you think, oh, actually, I would quite like this level up a little bit. Technical perspective, it's really important for that. Emotional. If you're not happy with your setup, tell your engineer. They won't be offended. They would much rather you be happy and confident in your performance, as that reflects well on everyone and makes for a happy engineer. The amount of times as an engineer I've said to an artist, oh, are you happy with this? And they go, well, and they're like, but it's fine. I'm like, no, we're going to start again. Do you want this? What do you want? They're like, well, I would prefer a little bit more of this in my monitor or something. I'm like, okay, so we can do that. People feel awkward asking for it. Don't feel awkward, because it's your performance. It's you that's on stage. It's you that is performing to everyone, and that'll be your reputation. And everyone will go away, if they've never seen you before, that'll be your impression, their impression of you. So it's very important. And I've briefly touched on it, but reputation. The music industry is very well connected and word travels fast. So you really want to uphold a professional reputation, and you want people to be willing to work with you. So remember to always be professional and kind. I know that's kind of given, but the amount of artists that I've worked with that have kind of forgotten that. And although the music industry is very big, word travels very fast. So if you're not very good at communicating, they'll say, oh, well, this person wasn't the greatest, I didn't have the best experience with them. People will remember that, unfortunately, much more than a positive one. So make sure you are always kind and professional. So there are 3 categories to communication. There's prior to your performance, during your performance, and post-performance. So before the show, make sure you send your tech spec and any additional information that an engineer might need to know in advance. Don't leave it until like a few days before, because you don't want to be scrambling to put all your information together and send it off. And chances are someone might not get to read it, which means they might not be able to give you the best performance because they haven't been able to look over all your specifications in advance. That has happened to me, and it is very stressful as an engineer. So just to ease everyone, it's very important to send it all. And also, if any information is missing or additional info is required, they can then ask for it to be sent across. So be prepared to send across any information that you might not have already written and sent across. If you're unsure of what they're asking of you, say if they're like, oh, well, do you need any DI boxes or something, for example, and you have no clue what that is, don't be afraid to ask and clarify, because everyone has to start somewhere, especially even in smaller venues. I've had people being like, oh, I'm not too sure what this means. And I'm like, absolutely fine. I would rather someone communicate me than just kind of say, oh, well, I think I need this, but I'm not too sure. Just ask, because chances are we are more than willing to help you, and everyone gets to learn that way. And I still learn things today just by asking questions. So it's really important. And also, if any of your technical requirements change prior to your show, please remember to inform the event crew of the changes, as I cannot tell you how frustrating it is when you get to the performance and they say, oh, actually, we want to change our whole stage plot. We're going to swap the band over and we're going to do this, this, and this. And their brains go, oh my gosh, we have to change it all now. If you don't have any changes, please make sure you can inform your engineer and your crew and venue staff as soon as possible. Okay, so moving on to during sound check. So first thing I would recommend to do is introduce yourself to your engineer and your crew if they're a stage crew as well. This makes a good first impression and makes it more personable if you can refer to them by their name. I always do the same as sound engineer. I always go and introduce myself to the crew and bands and everyone that I'll be working with, because that is something that bands and crew remember if you remember their name. It's just a tiny little detail that makes it so much nicer for everyone involved. So that'll be the thing you remember and you will tell people about. If there is something you are struggling to set up or you've forgotten, tell your engineer, as they will also be able to help. The amount of times where I've had instruments where people have tried to set mics up and gone, I'm not too sure how this goes, and I'm like, that's fine. I'd rather someone ask than try and set it up and at the risk of breaking something or damaging some equipment of their own or of ours. So I'd much rather just someone ask. Very important, and probably sounds like common sense, but listen to your sound engineer. Communication is very important, but also total silence is as well. So during sound checks, they will communicate what they need from you as a performer, but in some cases it might be total silence whilst they fix a technical issue, because there is nothing worse than a guitarist just noodling in the background whilst you're trying to fix a sound level and you can't hear anything and all you can hear is this guitar noodle. So if they ask you to be completely silent, we are loving what we're hearing, but we need silence in that moment in time, basically. And as I said, if you're unhappy with something, so like your monitor mix or the overall sound of your performance, please mention it. As an engineer, it's so frustrating to hear at the end of the performance, oh, well, I wish it could have sounded a bit better, because if you had communicated that, you would have been happy during your performance and we would have not bothered that you would have asked us to change it. We would have been so much happier in that moment in time. So I know it might be nerve-wracking asking for changes, but do not be discouraged. Please just ask for it and it will make everyone a lot happier. So during your performance, this might seem like common sense again, but remember what time your set is due to start. The amount of performers that have gone, oh guys, you're on in 5 minutes, and they go, oh my gosh, we're on in 5 minutes, and they panic because they just didn't realize at all. They just had no concept of time. So ensure you are prepared and ready on stage for the start of your set. Your engineer may give you a time warning at the beginning of your set. I often do this personally. It's not intended to rush people, but just to make you aware, and it keeps the communication link strong between the artist and the engineer. I usually say, oh guys, like, it's your 5 minute call, just to let you know. And they're like, yeah, cool. So at that point, they'll probably already be on stage. Or they'll be just like warming up, but everything will be muted on stage, so the audience won't hear anything. So when you're ready to start your set, give your engineer time. This could be something as simple as a thumbs up, a head nod, or something you've previously agreed on. Often I kind of go thumbs up and they nod their head, or they just give me a thumbs up. So it's basically so the engineer can fade out the house music and unmute the instruments and mics. And it's basically just so the whole show runs a little bit smoother just by that simple little piece of communication. So if during your performance you need something changed in your monitor mix, please communicate this, as this could impact your performance if you can't hear something in yourself. Like if you're a vocalist and you can't hear your vocals, please communicate this, because we don't want you to have to struggle all the way through the performance. So often ways artists do this is they communicate with hand gestures. So often they'll point at themselves. So if they want their own vocal mics going up, they'll point at themselves and go like myself vocals like up, or they'll go down, or if it's another member they want up, they'll point to the member and then go like up or down. So as an engineer, we kind of look out for those things. But if we aren't able to see those cues, the best way to do it is just say in between songs, just kind of saying to the mic, oh, could I please get some more of this in my monitor mix? Can I please get some more of this so I can hear myself, basically? I've had artists before where they kind of just shout and go, I can't hear myself. And that kind of gets to the point. But if we're talking about politeness and good communication, the best way to be to ask between songs and just say, oh, could I please have this up a little bit? And often the audience kind of goes, oh, that's quite a nice way to say it, other than some artists kind of being quite loud and outspoken to be like, I need this turned up. So another good thing about communication. And then post-performance, after you've finished your set, you've had an amazing show, check with your engineer before you unplug or remove any equipment. So this is because we need to mute all the channels up on the desk, because if you unplug something, it's going to be pop, it's going to pop, there's going to be feedback present, and sometimes it can damage the equipment if it's quite old or sensitive. So most of the time we will give you a signal to unplug before you even ask, but it's always good practice to ask, because some engineers, after they've done their mix and their show, they kind of just forget. And so it's always good just to say, like, point and just say, can I unplug it? And most of the time they'll mute it up and you'll be all good to unplug. Another really important thing to remember is, if you are not a headliner, remember there might be another band trying to set up on the stage whilst you are trying to load off. So it's important that you not only communicate with the engineer, but them as well, to make sure you don't leave any equipment behind and you give the next band a sufficient amount of time to set up and get ready, because there is nothing worse than loads of people scrabbling about on a tiny stage trying to get everything set up. So yeah, that's another important thing. And also, at the end of the gig, thank your engineer. It really does mean a lot to us, and chances are that we will remember that if we work with you again in the future. Even if it's so many years down the line, we will still remember that. This is also the opportunity to give us feedback and focus on the positives of the sound, as quite often we don't really get much feedback. So I really value it, as it helps me improve. So I always say, oh, I really like how you did this. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll take that on board if I do another band of that genre or that style again. It's always a learning curve for us, basically, as I still am doing live sound for bands that I have never done before, like big brass bands and things like that, basically. Okay, moving swiftly on to tech specs. So when I mention tech specs quite a lot of the time, people's faces just go black and they're like, they go blank and they're like, what is a tech spec? So what is a tech spec? It's a document that outlines the technical requirements for a performance. So it also kind of just outlines what equipment and conditions are required for the artist to deliver the show at the highest standard. So it often features a stage plot, audio setup, lighting requirements, backline requests, power supply points, and contact details. If you have no clue about some of the things I've just said, do not worry, I will be covering that in a second. And there'll also be a Q&A at the end, so you can always ask then about things. And a well-written tech spec can help prevent misunderstandings and miscommunication between performers and engineers, as well as also preventing any last-minute surprises. So basically, as engineers, we kind of know what we're getting ourselves into when we read a tech spec, and we know what to expect from you as a band. So I've got a few examples of tech specs that I'm going to quickly run through, as I thought it's easier to show you some examples than me just sitting and telling you what you should and what you shouldn't include. These are all tech specs that I have encountered in the past. I've blocked out the band names and artist names just for privacy reasons. But this band, as we can see on the screen, so it's just kind of quite basic. You've got the performer name and then their role in the band, and then kind of their equipment and things like that. So this tech spec I've written, it's okay for a smaller band just starting out. It clearly states the performers' names and what they play and what their technical requirements are. It's fairly easy to read. However, I would say instead of like a written stage layout, a actual stage plot drawn up would be a lot better idea, just so we can visualize it easier as sound engineers, because sometimes we don't have very long to look at these documents, and when you're trying to do things on the fly, it's not very helpful. There is also no contact details, no backline requests. So with the drummer, it just says cymbals and snare. We're assuming they're using their own backline, but they're only bringing cymbals and snare. Well, if we haven't got any drums and backline for them, then they're just going to have cymbals and a snare for their set, basically. There's also no audio specifications and no like patch lists of how they want things put in. It's not really that much of an issue for a smaller band, but I would say the more professional you can write your tech spec out from the beginning, the better it will be for you. And also people look at your tech spec and go, oh, they're really professional, they'll know what they're doing. They have also put no information on what their sound is like as a band. So as a sound engineer, it's quite misleading. So I wouldn't know until the sound check what they would like. So what they sound like. They could be a heavy metal band. They could be a pop band. I wouldn't have a single clue until I read up on it. So it's okay for a smaller band, just for a starting tech spec, but there are things that could be improved on it, basically. This next one, yes, this actually was a tech spec I was sent before, and I would advise this is not personally how you do it. It literally just says vocals and if they're running through a DI or an amp or what, basically. So yeah, it's not a great example. There's no stage plot, so I don't know where they want to be positioned on the stage, as sometimes drummers and guitarists and bassists swap over on different sides of the stage and things, so it's not very handy. There's no patch list. I don't know how many vocals they've got. They could have more than one vocal. They could have it doubled. The same with electric guitar. Sometimes guitars are doubled and run through 2 different channels. I wouldn't have a clue on this one, so I'd have to talk to them in advance, which would probably take time off their sound check. There's no performer info. Not even names of the performers. So again, I'm kind of guessing as to what they sound like, because an SPD could be any sort of genre, basically. No contact details, so I won't be able to contact them in advance asking about any technical specifications they might need. And also there is a big incorrect part of this tech spec. Vocals are not DI'd, they are run through a microphone with an XLR. So I did also speak to the vocalist about that and say, are you running any effects? Because that's the only way it would run. So they have since changed their tech spec since I spoke to them. I'm working with them to change it now, which is really nice, but there's that one. And then this one is a really, really good example of a tech spec with a band that I've worked with. Again, I've blocked all their names out and things. So first of all, we can easily see you've got the band name in the top left corner that's covered by the red strip, and tech spec 2024. So again, they're updating it. That's really good. First thing I notice when I look at this is the stage plot. You've got a nice, easy, simple stage plot to understand with labels, what they use, what equipment they're bringing. Then we can see it's a 4-piece indie alternative rock band. Amazing. I know what I'm getting myself in for. Their sound inspiration. So if I could listen in advance of some of them and see what their mixes are like, what they sound like. It's always really good if you've got sound inspirations. They don't have to be exactly the same, but if you've got inspirations, it's always worth like popping that down. So an engineer's kind of aware, because they can always listen to them in advance, even if you've got no music released. And monitor mixes. Although we ask as an engineer for monitor mixes, it's always really handy to have it on that piece of paper if we run out of time and don't have time to do it in the sound check. It's very simply laid out. I wouldn't worry if you don't know too much about your monitor mixes if you're starting out. This is always something you can kind of add on as an additional. But that's on there. And then you've got your patch list to the right here, which is basically showing me what they want mic'd up, how they want it mic'd up. Really nice. And then the front of house cheat sheet at the top, how they want it mixed. Basically, it's kind of just like a guide for me. It's got the lighting on there, how they want it. So they've definitely got a vision of what they want their live shows to be like, which is really handy as an engineer when you just get given this pack and it's all good to go. The only thing about this tech spec that I'm not the biggest fan of is that it's got no contact details, because sometimes when they put uses digital pedal board or uses pedal board, are they plugging that straight in to my system, or are they running it differently? So I would want to ask those questions about how they're running it. So I would want a contact detail to contact them about that, but there isn't one on here. But other than that, it's a pretty solid tech spec. Obviously, it doesn't look the prettiest, but I will get onto that in a second as to why they don't need to be the most colourful and flamboyant things. Okay, so now on to what you should include on tech spec. So before we get into that, here are some key points that you should remember. Keep it simple. Every performer will want their spec to be pretty and match their aesthetic, but most of the time it makes it so much harder for us as engineers and crew to read and understand, especially when you're backstage at a festival. You've got 10 bands on a stage and you get given a pack of 10 specs. I had one where they included photographs, portraits of themselves on it, and it was just so complicated to read, and it was like on a bright orange background. So that was really frustrating. So make sure you just keep it simple, black and white. It does the job. Ensure that it is correct and up to date. If anything is out of date on your spec, this might confuse the engineers. I had one engineer where I was following up, one band where I was following up with them and said, right, so you've got 2 guitars for this performance. They went, I know the guitarist, he dropped out ages ago, so it's just 1 guitar. So, oh, okay, that made my job easier, but sometimes it makes it harder when they add instruments or they add gear. So always just check with them. Only include what you actually need. I've had this quite a few instances where artists have done quite large scale performances and they've had this massive tech spec with so many instruments and so many different performers on, and then it comes to it and it's a small scale venue and it's only like 3 performers. So again, a lot of frustration, a lot of time reading through that and prepping, and make sure I've got all my equipment for it to only be like 3 people instead of like 10 people. So just make sure you only include what you actually need on your spec. Okay, so this is quite chunky and I apologize, but I will go through it. So stage plot, it's just the plot of the stage, where your drummer is, where your guitarist is. It can just be pictures of clip art. You can just have the names and just include the names of the musicians, your instruments, and where they're positioned on stage, basically. Your audio setup. So basically, are you using microphones? Is it an XLR input, or do you need a DI box if you're playing piano? That sort of thing. And if you're using any microphones, we typically don't tend to use phantom power on microphones, but some DI boxes need it. So basically, does it need just that extra little bit of powering on the desk at my end to have it work? Lighting requirements. This isn't necessarily like the most important thing to include on there, but if you do include it, it is a nice touch, especially if you get to a venue where they can control the lighting. So if you want specific lighting for certain songs, if you've got like a lighter song, you want to include that. Backline requests. So are you bringing your own amps? Are you bringing a drum kit? If not, you will have to request backline. That is what backline is. So backline is big parts drum kit. So the breakables are snare and cymbals. So most drummers are expected to bring those. And most of the time, venues provide that, and amps, or the headliner provides that basically for all the other bands. Power supply. Do you have any equipment that requires additional power supply? So pedal boards, sometimes like synths and electric keyboards as well, they'll need power supplies. So make sure you request that you need that, because we'll need to make sure we have it on stage for you. Contact details, so name, phone number, email address, so we can get in touch with you. Monitor mixes, again, not necessarily essential, but always good to have, especially if we have to power through and we don't have time. So basically, it's just what you hear on stage from the big wedges in front of you. And then front of house cheat sheet. So again, anything else you would like to add to your performance, how you'd like it mixed, if you know. Again, if you don't, this isn't essential, but if you feel like this would be helpful for you and is something specifically in your performance that you want the engineer to know, it's always good to put it on there. Perfect. So moving on to sound checks. So why are sound checks so important? So it's not only an opportunity for the sound engineer to understand your sound and style and how they can complement it before your performance. So they understand before your performance, even if they've never heard you perform before, they can get a taste of what you sound like, and they're like, oh, okay, I know what I need to do for this performance. It kind of is just dialing into the genre and the style of your music, basically. But it also checks the venue sound system and ensures that the sound front of house and on stage is clear and set at the appropriate volumes and frequencies. So an acoustic gig is obviously going to be a little bit louder than a heavy metal gig, which we'll probably have to tone down a little bit depending on the noise restrictions of venues and things. And they're even more important for performances louder in volume, such as rock and grunge genres, as the channels and effects will be in operation. More channels of those will be in operational desk, so it might get a bit overloaded. So we have to make sure that everything is coping and that things aren't running too hot. The signals aren't running too hot, so we're not like peaking or anything, basically. So what should you expect from a sound check? So for those of you that have never had a formal sound check before, that is absolutely fine. I'm going to quickly run you through what you should expect from a sound check. So you'll get a load in time. It's important that you introduce yourself to the engineer after you've loaded into the venue. They might want to discuss your tech spec then and just see if anything's changed. That's what I always do whenever I meet an artist. I say, right, okay, this is what I've been sent across. Is this information still valid? Is there anything else I need to know that you haven't sent across prior? Most of the time, what's been sent across is correct. There might be a few minimal tweaks, but it's always good to know in advance before you start. Then you'll be called for sound check at your allocated time, where you'll set up your equipment on stage and you'll wait further instructions from the engineer. So the engineer will ask one musician at a time to play their instrument and check the levels and flash it front of house. Basically, it's just we put it out the front just to basically see if it's working and it sounds good for us. This will then be completed for all instruments and vocals before moving on to monitor mixes. So it's what you hear on stage. So again, they'll then cycle through the musicians and ask what they want to hear on stage from the monitor, from their monitor before putting the required instruments. So a vocalist will probably want mostly their vocals, bit of guitar, maybe not drums if they've got drums behind them, obviously bass, things like that, but they'll want their vocals to be highest in their mix, basically. And then after the monitors have been done, the engineer will ask them to sound check a song to see if the front of house and the monitor levels are appropriate and maybe pop some effects on and things like that. If the band are unhappy with the monitor levels after sound checking, this would then be discussed and we'll get it changed. And then they'll sound check another song or a chorus of a song, and we'll get it done until the band and the engineer are both happy with the sound check, and then it will conclude. So what should you expect from a sound check? So during sound check, it is really important that you follow the directions of the sound engineer, as this could directly impact your performance and the quality of it, as I briefly mentioned earlier. So when you ask to sound check your instrument, typically keep playing your instrument until informed otherwise, just so we can EQ it and get the levels right on it. So if you're a bassist, just ask you to play bass, basically. It's important as a bassist and guitarist that you inform your sound engineer of any different tones or sounds you have on your pedal board if you've got one, and they might ask you to sound check those too if you've got like a heavier tone or like a lighter one, just to make sure we can get the levels right on those portions so we know for the songs as well. Vocalists, is really important to inform your engineer of the dynamics of your performance, so I would suggest sound checking a slightly quieter song and a louder one so the engineer knows what to expect during your performance and when you're swapping it up, so we can change the levels, basically. When you are asked for monitor mix requirements, typically you want your vocals / instrument higher than the other vocals / instruments so you can hear yourself more clearly. However, it is completely your preference, and over time of performing you will discover what works best for you as a performer. If you want something changed in your mix, please do not be afraid to ask for it to be changed. Again, it's all about communication and confidence, and I know it can be absolutely nerve-wracking, but everyone is in the exact same position as you. I am as a sound engineer sometimes, so just be confident and ask for it. And vocalists, while your vocal effects such as reverb and delay will be added front of house, they will typically not be fed into your monitors unless you ask for them. So if you don't want a dry vocal in your monitor, which I know can be very off-putting for some people, but some people prefer it, you can ask for a little bit of reverb and delay, and the engineer will kind of ask you to sing, and they'll feed it in and see how you feel about the sound of it. You can always ask for a bit more or less. So my top tips for sound check is it is okay to ask questions. If you're unsure about something, ask your engineer. It is okay to not understand what an engineer is asking you to do. Rather than compromise on something, ask the engineer to elaborate and help you. As engineers, we would much rather you ask questions than just go along with something and kind of wing it and go, oh, I'm not really happy with this, but it's fine, I'll just go with it. We'd rather spend that little bit extra time making sure you are happy and you're confident, as that can also sometimes knock the confidence for your performance and things like that. It's okay also to ask your engineer to change something. if you're not happy with your vocal level in your monitor, ask your engineer to adjust it. It takes us a couple of minutes max, and it'll make you a lot happier for your performance, and also allow you to hear yourself, which will be really helpful if you're struggling to hear yourself and you can't really sing vocal parts. You've got a really complex vocal part coming up. Your engineer would rather you ask for it to be adjusted than have your performance compromised later down the line, as that not only reflects on you, that also reflects on the engineer. And the biggest thing as well, which I say to a lot of people, is don't make assumptions. I know the engineer is there to make you sound good, but they also don't necessarily know your sound. So if you know that an instrument or vocal part does not sound right for some reason, it sounds really crackly, it sounds really crunchy, challenge it. There have been times before where I have been working gigs where I haven't been the engineer, and the band have gone, that sounds really not like what our guitar usually sounds like. And the engineer goes, no, it's fine. And then minutes before they go on stage, go, oh, that cable's actually broken, so we've swapped it out, and then the guitar sounds better. So in most circumstances, they have not heard your music, they have not seen your live performances. So if you have a gut feeling it is not correct, chances are it isn't, and it is okay to challenge that. And sometimes you can be wrong. I sometimes think, oh gosh, my guitar doesn't sound like that when I perform live, and actually it's like, oh no, it is just my tone, I need to sort my tone out. But most times, if it's been working just before you've been at the venue and it's worked like the day before, it's probably something with one of the cables or something not being plugged in correctly. So do not be afraid to challenge it and say, I'm not quite sure this is right. And yeah, that kind of concludes the learning portion of this webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them now. I will stop sharing my screen. But just quickly as well, I will just pop my details there if anybody would like to write them down. I'll lean this way so my bun doesn't cover my email. But if you have any additional questions that I won't be able to answer tonight, please feel free to message me or email me. And if you want any help on how to write tech specs, I'm happy to help people write some tech specs and things like that. Or if you've just got any live sound questions in general, please feel free to ask them now, or just pop me a message. I will pop this back up at the end, but I will stop sharing so I can answer your questions. Hopefully I haven't rambled too much. But yeah, it'll be nice to interact with some of you in just a second. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have some questions from Carol. Is there such a thing as a standard tech spec template available?
Ooh, personally, I haven't seen a tech spec template. I know Musicians Union have a good article on how to write a tech spec and what to include, and how to include that. So it would be worth Googling and having a look at that. That would be quite a useful thing, Carol. I'll actually look at putting together a tech spec template. Actually, that might be a really good idea, personally. So I think that would actually be a really good idea. So thank you for giving me that idea. If you'd be interested, I would happily send that across. But no, there are a few examples on Google, but I haven't seen a specific template that you can kind of download and fill in yourself. So that's definitely really good. I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay. What about the images/videos for screen? Should we include them into the tech specs? If the venue requires that, yes, I would send those across. I would send them via a WeTransfer link. That is quite a good way to send them across. Also potentially with an email, but I'd also bring them on a USB with you to the venue, because the amount of time sometimes venues don't have that information. I would definitely bring one along with you as well. That's really important. Do you have any key advice for playing a first gig? Oh, okay. I know it sounds really simple, but do not be nervous. I know that's really easy to say and so easy to not do, because everyone freaks out. Even I still freak out. But I'd go in really calm and be confident. You know that you are a good performer and you don't need validation from anyone else in the room. They will come to see you be amazing. And the sound engineer knows that you're good as well. So come in, be friendly, be bubbly, and I know I'm quite a loud personality, and not everyone is a loud personality. So if you're not like that, then you don't have to come in as loud as me. But the sound engineer will match your energy when you go in. It's really important that you talk to them. Like I said, if you're not sure about anything they're asking, ask questions. No question is a silly question. I still ask what I would think is a silly question, and I get told, no, that's a really valuable piece of information. So go in and just have an amazing time. I think that's the biggest thing. Enjoy it as well, because it will go so quickly when you're on stage. You'll spend all this time worrying about it, and then when you get off stage, you'll be so happy. But go in and just have an amazing time, really. Thank you, Beth. As a singer, if you're using a mic at a venue, what info do you need to share? Example cables and stuff, and how do you write about vocal effects? So if you're sharing a mic at a venue, on a tech spec, you would just put that you are vocals and that it would go via an XR. You wouldn't really need to put much down unless you're bringing your own microphone. You don't really need to put much info. You can bring your own microphone if you know that that microphone works best for you, but chances are the venue will have their own equipment that works best for the venue. So I think it's really important to just have your tools at your disposal. And how do you write about vocal effects? So typically when you are in the studio or at home, it depends what you often find putting on your own vocals. So most of the time in live environments, the two effects you would use on your vocals are reverb and delay. So for more acoustic songs, it would more be like a little bit of reverb. It'd be more reverb heavy than, say, a rock performance or something. And delay, it would probably be, how I tend to do delay is more like softer songs on like the trailing ends of phrases and things. So looking at that, one thing I would say, which is really handy to use, would be to look at some of your inspirations and people that you kind of, I wouldn't say compare yourself to, but people you draw inspiration from, and that this sound you're kind of trying to achieve, if it's similar, I would look up their music and see what kind of effects they have on their vocals, as well, as that might also help you in your live performance. I won't go into too much more depth as I've got some other questions, but please feel free to message me if I can go into more depth about that, because it is a little bit complicated to talk about that one. Perfect. No worries, Angelica. Glad I could help. Would you say that engineers will expect a tech spec no matter how small the gig is, whether venue or band size? Yes, most venues will ask you for a tech spec, even if it's just a little acoustic gig. Obviously, if it's only a little acoustic gig and it's you and an acoustic guitar, it won't have to be very big. It'll probably just be yourself with a little stage plot of you just with the vocals and the guitar. But it's very important to always get into the habit, because there will always be one time where you're caught out and you have to say, oh no, and you cobble together a little document, which I think is what the second one I showed you, they kind of just cobbled a little document together as they didn't realize they were going to get asked for a tech spec. So I think it's always really important to be prepared, but most times they will still always ask you for a tech spec, no matter what the scale. If it's only like the tiniest little desk or the biggest desk, they will always ask for a tech spec. In your experience, is it more common for vocalists to use a vocal pedal for extra effects or not? I would say it's more uncommon actually for vocalists to use a vocal pedal. Most of the time we do it on the desk, unless it's music of a specific genre where you've kind of you've honed into your sound, and that is exactly what sound you want. And obviously some vocalists are quite particular. If they know exactly what they want that to sound like, they'd rather adjust it from their end, which I completely understand as an engineer, as sometimes I've come across bands where they've had vocal pedals, and actually after the performance, when I evaluated, I would have had not a clue what they would have wanted, looking back at it. And I was thinking I would not have done that vocal effect. But actually, out of all the gigs I've done, I think I've only encountered about 2 or 3 with a vocal pedal. So it's not very common, but it does still happen. And if you are wanting to use one, go ahead and use one. I wouldn't say that deters people from using them. It's just not as common anymore, really. No worries. If anyone's got any other questions, please feel free to pop them now. Sorry, I know I ramble for England. It doesn't have to be tech spec or anything as well. It can be like live sound based, or it can just be questions about my career, I guess. If you're intrigued and you're nosy like I am, I always am intrigued on that things. So yeah, feel free. I know it's quite intimidating asking here, so you can always message me afterwards if you'd rather. Do you feel it's important for sound engineers to have performing experience? In a sense, yes. I feel like I've come from a performing background. I was in a 3-piece band, and I do feel that when I came to uni to study music production, it did have a good background for me, because it helped me understand from both sides. So as an engineer, it helped me understand the performer's perspective. So I know as a performer being in that situation, it can be stressful. So it's also, I think, helped me be a better engineer by communicating, how I go about my communication skills. So I always understand that sometimes people get a bit intimidated and can ask questions and they feel a bit unsure. So I always try and make people feel at ease and try and make it a positive experience. So I always try and crack some jokes here and there, because I know it can be very stressful, especially when you encounter artists that have just come off the back of really long tours, and they're exhausted, or artists that are just starting as well. I think it applies to sort of any situation. I wouldn't say it's necessary, but I do think it is important to have some form of musical background, whether they haven't performed live, but just to know what it's like to be in that person's shoes. What is your experience at BIM? Would you recommend studying there, or any other advice on this studying music? My experience as BIM has been absolutely amazing. But I think your experience at BIM is very much what you make it. So I am on a joint honours, so I study songwriting and music production. So I think it's very what you make of it. Because I know some people that just go to their lectures and that's all they do of BIM, and they just expect to go to the lectures and come out and do that. But that's not the way to do BIM. You have to go to all the master classes, you go to all the additional workshops. I've been to see my careers advisor, and that's how I've ended up getting all of these experiences and these opportunities, because I've gone to my careers advisor and said, oh, I'd like some work experience in this field. And once your name gets about, you'll get offered more and more opportunities. So BIM is really what you make of it, but the facilities and the tutors and the industry experience has enabled me to do that. Because I definitely say without BIM, I wouldn't be in the position where I am today. I wouldn't have had access to those connections. I wouldn't have had access to those industry links. Like, I wouldn't have even known where to start. But once you get a foot into the industry, it's a lot easier. So even if any of you wanted to perform or something, or with anything with live sound, you've now got a foot in the door because you know me in the industry. It's just about getting your foot in the door, really. As a teacher and a mum, how can I encourage more women to go down a non-performer musical route? Ooh. I think it's the realization for me. I think with me, I realized I came to BIM with a completely different mindset. I came that I was going to be a performer or a producer. And then I came to BIM and realized, actually, when I looked more in depth to the music industry, I realized how little like opportunities and also how tight the industry is. And to make music, you have to work so hard at it, and you have to put yourself out there constantly. And it's very straining. And personally, I didn't feel like that was the route for me. So after a discussion with my parents and also my lecturers and tutors, I discovered live sound was the way for me. So I think it's more encouragement and understanding. I think a lot of people don't understand women in the technical roles of the industry. So speaking to people, they don't quite understand what I do. When I say I work at festivals, they say, oh, you just work at the bar, or you do tickets, or you steward. I'm like, no, I actually work the festivals. Because I think it rooted for me, the idea of going into a tech role was I loved engineering, like just general engineering. Like, if I wasn't going to do music, I'd probably go into automotive engineering. So I think it's the encouragement of women in engineering as well. And I also think a lot of people don't realize that working in the music industry isn't just about performing and singing. There are so many different roles. So I think it's also the exposure to all the different roles really in the industry, which a lot of people don't realize. So I think if we get more exposure to those roles, especially from an earlier age, and encouragement, because the music industry is never linear. It can take years, and you can go like all about to get there. So I think definitely more exposure to begin with, and more encouragement and touching on it more. And also there isn't very many experiences, opportunities for women at a younger age to go and do sound engineering, I found, and things like that. There isn't that many opportunities until you get to sort of post 18, like university level. I find if you can get women and like young girls into it earlier, it will foster creativity and it will help allow them to further it and further their studies with it. Basically, I think that's a really important thing with it.
Yeah, and also having examples like you doing it, so then we see other women do it, and then they want to do it as well. So,
yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's just the lack of female sort of representation. So the more and more we can do this, like I would love to give more talks like this and encourage women, because I think when I say to a lot of people what I do, they actually go, oh my gosh, like that's amazing, how did you do that? And they think, oh, I've never thought of a female being a sound engineer, that sort of thing. I think it's just that sort of environment. I think encouragement and role models are very important, so it seems normal. Yeah, exactly, Carol. It's very much making it normal, making it the norm, because we're so used to seeing male figures in those roles. I mean, definitely for me, I've had so many comments where it's like, oh, you don't look like a sound engineer. It's like, well, what does a sound engineer look like? Is it because I have long hair? Is it because I wear makeup? Is it because I present more feminine? I don't know what it is. Is it because I'm not like a middle-aged man that wears a cap? Is it like those sort of things? But I think it's very important. Where would you suggest finding a variety of fair-paying jobs in the music industry? A lot of jobs for me like this, it is kind of who you know, and it's quite a lot of word of mouth. So once you know someone in the industry and you've worked with someone, chances are they'll offer you jobs again. So for instance, I worked a festival with BMI Work 2000 Trees, and off the back of that I met a band there, and I went to Manchester a few weeks ago to network with them, and I'm now in touch with them and speaking to them about potentially doing a tour with them next year. So it's that sort of connections, keeping in touch with people, getting people's social medias. Very good thing as well, I would say, is LinkedIn. I download LinkedIn, post about what you're doing, share those connections with people, interact with people basically. But yeah, definitely LinkedIn is a very good platform because people are always posting about jobs and you can email them. Off the back of that, I actually also have been offered a freelance position with a company called Crew Gal, and it's basically they provide an all-female crew. You go to festivals and like set up, and it's all-female crew with them, and we're all pink, and it's amazing. It's female and non-binary, sorry, and they've done festivals recently like Glastonbury and other large-scale events, so that's incredible. So things like that. But yeah, definitely LinkedIn, definitely just all over social media. Social media is a very big thing to get a job. It's not like a 9-to-5 where you can do your 9-to-5, go home and then forget about it. Music is very much a continuous sort of cycle, so you really have to be enthusiastic and put your all into it. It seems you have to be open to traveling around. Potentially, yes, unless you're looking for like a stable job like in central London or in somewhere like Manchester, like a really big music city. It's kind of you're more traveling about. Yeah, I mean, I think a really important thing for me is like having my car, because I drove to all my festivals, so that was really, really important for me. I think it's just the willingness to travel. It's not necessarily you have to be able to drive, but the willingness to travel about, for me in particular. But I would absolutely love that, so that's not a problem for me. But I know there are some people who are looking at more commercial jobs like Broadwick, where they run like drum sheds and print works in London. That's more of a commercial job, and you can kind of be stationed in London and work for them, things like that. Thanks for your talk, it's been great. In my experience, sound engineers can vary in ability, and a not so good sound engineer can have a huge impact on your performance. Definitely a good sound engineer had to come top of my list, as it allows me to so much more access to the nuances of my sound as I perform. Is there anything a performer can do to help with the sound other than asking for more reverb, less bass, treble, etc., so we're not at the mercy of the sound engineer we've been given? I completely agree with sound engineers' variability, and there are some that are very arrogant and stuck in their ways. The only thing I would say is communicate as much as you can. Potentially, if you're sending signals, sometimes they can be a bit too hot, so I would check like your signals if you're sending like tracks, because sometimes if they're sending and they're peaking really high, we can't necessarily get them down on the desk, and it is a bit harder to output the sound. So I would, if you've got tracks, I would review them and things like that. But other than that, if you've got your terminology and you've got it, the only thing I would say is hammer it in on your tech spec. That way you've got it written and you've also mentioned it to them. Unfortunately, there's not so much more you can do. The only thing I would recommend is feel free to message me and we can talk more about this, but I would say is try and find a sound engineer that kind of understands you, and if you can record that performance, kind of you can share about to other engineers and send like a sample to them potentially and be like, this is what we would like us to sound like, and you can send an audio file across, things like that. I've had that before. Just kind of hammering on their sound, and also potentially working with a sound engineer to like hammer out exactly what your sound is, so you can write it out and say, this is exactly what I want. I think that's really important. So yeah, Stephanie, so great to meet a female sound engineer. Thank you very much. That's really great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Very well done, Amy. It was your first talk. Well done.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you did amazing. Guys, we're done. If you have any questions, please follow through with Amy. Amy, if you could send me that template, that would be amazing, because I think it's really needed.
Yeah, of course. I'll get working on that, and hopefully I'll send it soon. Yeah, definitely.
From your perspective too, is exactly what engineer wants to see. So I think for us, for artists on the other side, it's like, okay, now I get it. And your examples were great. So thank you. Thank you for the presentation. You did so well. Thank you everyone for joining. We have coming up, we have our open mic on the 31st of October. So if you're around, come grab your tickets. We have our coffee meeting on the 27th of October. And our biggest event yet is going to be on the 14th of November. It's our anniversary, 2 years. So please join us. There'll be a panel, more women successful that are sharing their story, and also like bringing all this energy up so we can achieve amazing things together. Thank you so much for joining. Have an amazing night.